Welcome to Natural Pairing. This is Christine.
I'm Daisy.
And this is a podcast about wine. Today we're talking about Pinot Noir. And Pinot Noir is a famous grape variety for the place it comes from in Burgundy. There's a lot of history and lore around it. That's why we're doing this episode. Is to really talk about and talk through and help people understand how to select a Pinot Noir. Why is it an interesting grape variety? Why does it taste so different when it comes from France versus, let's say, California?
Pinot Noir is famously difficult to grow.
Well, it's true because, for instance, Cabernet and Chardonnay, and nothing against those two grape varieties, arguably the king and queen of grape varieties in wine, but both of those varieties are pretty vigorous and hardy, and you kind of can't mess them up. I mean, certainly you can, but they're vigorous and hardy, whereas Pinot Noir, it is more fickle. The grape itself is actually very thin-skinned. When it's in the sun, it actually kind of burns easily, essentially. It likes a lot of cloud cover. It likes a cooler climate.
It's not as adaptive to different types of climate because it really only has one general climate, which is cooler and no direct sunlight-ish.
But it's also kind of a chameleon of grapes. Whereas, again, Cab can taste very different from different places. But with Pinot, it's really dramatic. You don't have to be a wine expert or an expert taster to taste a classic Burgundy versus a classic California Pinot Noir and instantly taste the difference. I mean, they can taste like two completely different grape varieties just because of where they're grown. And that's really unique to Pinot Noir.
Yeah, Burgundy, where it's historically from, even within Burgundy itself, they started to notice how sensitive Pinot Noir was to the environment it was being grown in, the amount of sunlight, the type of soils, and just to the slightest change in its environment.
Okay, so we're talking about mid-1100, the Middle Ages.
The monks in Burgundy were planting Pinot Noir in sort of an obsessive way where they were writing down all the nuances of what row it was in.
What plot, what row, what aspect, meaning of the hillside, what was the soil composition. They noticed that all of these different factors played a role in the final wine.
Yeah, and just grapes that were grown a few hundred meters apart could taste totally different based on all the things that you just mentioned. And it founded this idea of what we call terroir.
Terroir is everything in the environment. So it's the climate, it's the soil, even the kind of flora and fauna. It's everything that encompasses a vine's environment and what would impact that vine and eventually the fruit.
It's not only that the monks noticed it, but they started this whole practice of analyzing and thinking through all of these variables and how they would ultimately affect the final wine.
And it was these final wines, some were wildly, they were all wildly different.
So when the winemakers started to make wine, they did a very hands-off approach because they wanted all of these aspects or all these elements in the grapes to shine through the final wine. They started to categorize all of these different plots of land, and they defined certain segments, whether it was a single row of grapes, a few rows, or it was a larger plot. That's where you get these classifications like Premier Cru or the highest one being Grand Cru. It really just depends on how the grapes are grown and the terroir that they are in.
And each of these plots was owned by different families at the time. The plots, we're not talking about acres and acres of vineyards. We're talking about, like you said, sometimes only a few rows of vines. So there's really an old world and a new world style of Pinot. Old world really refers to more of a French style, classically. Burgundy is relatively cool, pretty cloudy, rainy. The grapes typically don't get as ripe, which means that the alcohol levels will be a bit lower. You're going to have more kind of dried fruit versus fresh fruit. You're going to have more dried tea and dried herbs rather than fresh herbs. And then you're going to get more of this like blue high-toned fruit. So if you think about blue versus red, blue is a cool color. So it's going to be kind of that like blueberry, blackberry, plum, or prune.
But then if you fast forward to the 1960s and 70s, there was a whole movement here in California of rethinking and essentially reimagining these traditional grapes in new environments. So sort of they're finding the best way to express these that reflected the California terroir.
I mean, it wasn't about mimicking an old world style. It was about creating a new wine that really expressed the place that it was from.
And in California, we get a lot of sunshine and it's hot in certain places, but we actually have quite a lot of cooler regions, especially when it comes to winemaking. So even though Pinot Noir is really big in Santa Barbara, it's really the Santa Maria Valley, which gets a lot of the coastal breezes. It gets a lot of that maritime layer. So it's cooler in the mornings.
But California is also famous for its sunshine. So whereas it may be a cooler temperature, you do have those, 360 days of sunshine. And so the grapes do slowly get a lot more sun exposure.
And that sunshine is really the big difference between California Pinot and Burgundy. California's Pinot scene is massive. We've got Pinot growing everywhere from the ocean-cooled areas near Santa Barbara up through the Sonoma coast and the Russian River Valley. And as it gets a little bit warmer up there near the Russian River or Carneros even, that's where you see the style of Pinot change more from its traditional Burgundian style.
Yeah, I mean, the grapes essentially get more tan.
Yes, exactly. Terroir is everything when it comes to Pinot, right? This really helps describe the differences between California and Burgundy and Pinot Noir. So California, or in the New World, you tend to get a lot more red fruit flavors. The Pinot Noirs tend to be a bit jammier. Because there's more sun, it means the Pinot Noir grapes ripen a little bit more. There's a little bit more sugar in there. And therefore, you tend to get sugar equals alcohol. So therefore, you tend to get a little bit more alcohol in these wines. And
yeah, they're bigger, hotter, fleshier, jammier.
Some of these red fruits that we mentioned cherry or raspberry or cranberry. These are all the different flavor profiles that you tend to get in a California style Pinot compared to the traditional bluer fruit old world.
So of course, these styles are not black and white. In California, you can find producers that are going after an old world, leaner style. And in Burgundy in France, you're going to find producers that are going for more of a quote unquote modern or new world style with bigger plush fruit. So we think with just a little bit of background and a couple tips and hints as to how to shop for this, you'll find your perfect Pinot. When we're talking about Burgundy as a wine producing area, we're talking about what's known as the Côte d'Or. And instead of one giant wine region, it's actually a bunch of small patchwork vineyards that have formal designations. And each of these areas historically produces a wine with a distinctly different character. And some of these designated vineyard sites have achieved this cult status and really carry with them quite a high price tag. So that's when you get all of your famed Gevrey-Chambertin, Volnay, Meursault.
And again, some of these are a few acres and some of these are only a couple rows of vines. But the whole region, this whole Côte d'Or region, is producing insanely delicious Pinot Noir.
The really hidden gems come from lesser known vineyard sites within the larger region of Burgundy that don't demand the same price tag. So one of those small areas is known as Marcenais. And one of the names that pops up here is a producer by the name of Regis Bouvier. And this is such a gem. He's not chasing this cult status and fame. And he's really just farming quietly and carefully and letting the vineyards speak for themselves. He's a third generation grape grower farmer on this vineyard. Today they make this Pinot Noir that's beautiful, bright. It has this huge, gorgeous black cherry fruit, savory and sweet baking spice to it. It's a classic Pinot. It just has these layers of flavor that keep showing themselves that Burgundy is really famous for. It's kind of that long, slow cooked kind of dried fruit and tea and hay that is really sought after.
People really like to enjoy Pinot for, and it's really known for sort of unfolding layers. In general, Burgundy wines are known for being very ageable, and this is one that you can drink right now.
It's a classic Burgundy in the truest sense. It's not wildly expensive, and so if you're just kind of playing around and looking at different styles, this is a really great one to compare with something on the other end of the spectrum. For instance, a California Pinot Noir.
One of the big areas for Pinot Noir is Central California, right outside of Santa Barbara. One of the wines that we really like out of this region is from a winery called Scar of the Sea, and it's a husband and wife duo, and they make this absolutely amazing classic California style Pinot in that it is all red fruit, it's bright,
it's plush, ripe, plump. You get all of that kind of raspberry jam, but it still has all those layers of flavor. Get a little bit of baking spice in there too. It is just absolutely beautiful. California sunshine, no hard edges, and instantly anyone could tell the difference between these two styles of wine. But amazingly, they're the same grape. It's just the terroir that really sings. But it's really fun to try them against each other.
Yeah, I think the side-by-side tasting is one of our favorite things to do. You do have to pour 2 glasses. I think it's easier when you go back and forth to taste the differences.
Mm-hmm. And then you can play with pairings as well.
So when it comes to Pinot Noir, there are just some go-tos.
Well, and the classic is salmon. There's a whole festival up in Oregon at the International Pinot Noir celebration every year. They have a salmon bake, and that really is an homage to this pairing and how beautifully Pinot Noir pairs with salmon. And I wouldn't get geeky about Old World, New World here. Honestly, either style, any style will pair with salmon. A baked salmon, smoked salmon, gravlax, salmon tartare, salmon sushi.
It's like the fattier, oilier fish, right?
Yeah, it's not a delicate white fish. Like, this is a meaty, hearty fish. You can liken it to almost like a heartier protein. That's why it does so famously well with this red wine, because it is a bit heartier.
So my go-to is mushrooms. Your button mushroom all the way to every style Asian mushroom. Pinot Noir is just, I think, slam dunk with mushrooms because of the umami. And the wine doesn't overpower them. If anything, it sort of amplifies it because Pinot Noir has an almost umami flavor profile.
And that's actually another interesting note, Pinot Noir. It's one of the only wines that actually hits that umami place on your tongue, in your palate. So we taste sour on the sides of our tongue. We taste tannin near our gum line, but we taste umami in the middle back of your tongue. So this is kind of a fun experiment. Next time you're having a Pinot Noir, mindfully taste it. So switch it around in your mouth and let it wash over your tongue. And you'll notice it hits the middle back of your tongue and it's a different flavor profile. You're actually tasting more with this variety, which is cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Another one, beef bourguignon. This is the famous one from the Burgundy region. So this is a beef stew that's actually made with some of the Burgundy wine and then enjoyed with the wine at the end. It's a little heartbreaking to pay for a bottle of Burgundy and pour it into the stew, but you will be rewarded for that commitment. You have the beautiful acid of the Pinot Noir. You have the tannin of the Pinot Noir, but it's a red that won't overpower the dish at all. This is a long braised or stewed dish, which actually does really well with longer aged Burgundies.
Nice. Another one I'm thinking of is duck. Duck is a classic with Pinot Noir, and it's that sort of freshness of a Pinot, the acidity and the brighter fruit flavors. It sort of cuts through the richness of dark poultry meat. Really, any dark meat. You could even do a roasted chicken and just pick out the dark meat, or turkey if you make a turkey pie. All of these are really great pairings with Pinot. Today, we want to actually address a big question, which is, can a New World Pinot Noir be as soulful as an old world like a Burgundy? And we kind of want to unpack this because we should probably talk about what we mean by quote unquote soul in wine, because it's not age, it's not prestige. You'll never see soul on a list of tasting notes. It's not really a specific element like acidity or tannins.
It's like the essence of a wine. And I think when we talk about terroir, that feels like a really kind of hoity-toity way to describe wine, but it really is, it's the soul, right? It's like terroir is everything around it, but then the soul is like the essence of the wine after it's been grown and harvested and made, and you taste it. It's pretty ethereal. It's the sense of place, right? You're drinking something, but it's actually the representation of a place, and it's pretty singular.
Yeah, the Burgundian monks obsessed over this, right? So they wanted to make sure their final wines were as reflective as possible of the wine grapes, is the weather, the land, the choices the winemaker made. All of this was really reflecting the soul of the wine.
Yeah, to answer the question, can a New World wine be as soulful as a Burgundy? I would absolutely answer yes, because the whole idea is it's what you put into it. It's the intention behind it, and the whole movement of natural winemaking here in California, here in the United States. It's this movement back to the craft of not only winemaking, but also horticulture and vineyard management and understanding the environment that you're in and trying to create something that singularly only could be from that one place.
Yeah, I think that Pinot Noir is a really good way to showcase this. The California winemakers sought to find quote unquote soul in Pinot. And in doing so, they created a whole flavor profile and this idea that giving Pinot more sun could bring out bigger and different flavors. And so can you grow a soulful wine in a new world? I think the Pinot winemakers did so. And in doing so, they also created a whole new style. So we're going to close out with a couple of fun wine factoids.
Okay, first one. It takes approximately 600 to 800 grapes to make a single bottle of wine, which I just thought was interesting. And also, that is equivalent to 2.5 to 3 pounds of grapes.
That's so super crazy. I think a bag has like 50 grapes.
Yeah, so it's not like the grocery grapes. Like if you imagine the tinier grapes on the vine, like wine grapes.
That's true. I mean, wine grapes are more like the size of a marble. Like they're almost like a large blueberry.
600 to 800 grapes. That's a lot of individual grapes.
Okay, well, my factoid is about Pinot Noir because I thought it was thematically appropriate. So typically grapevines, when winemakers decide to plant new vineyards, they clone, or rather they take cuttings of the old grapevine and transplant it to a new vineyard versus planting seeds, just because you can get a lot of genetic variation. But when you take cuttings of the plant and you propagate it over and over and over, there can be small genetic changes that build up. But for the most part, a Cabernet Sauvignon, no matter how many times you cut off a clipping, clone it, and propagate it into a new vine, it will still be Cabernet Sauvignon. With Pinot Noir, it's actually very different. So it is the most sensitive grape variety when it comes to mutation. In fact, in France, they recognize 50 different clones of Pinot Noir that have subtle variations. A lot of these are like sort of hard to see or notice. Certain clones of Pinot Noir have different ripening times, they have different disease resistance, they have different tannin levels, and there are over 1,000 sort of variants that are recognized as Pinot Noir. But in France, they formally recognize 50 different mutations as Pinot Noir. But when Pinot Noir changes skin color, that's no longer considered a clone. It's now we have a whole new grape. So maybe I'll quiz you on this. Can you name some of the natural mutations of Pinot Noir where the skin color changed and it became a different grape?
Do they all begin with Pinot?
They do. They sure do.
So Pinot Grigio, Pinot Meunier.
There's one more.
Pinot Nero. Oh, no, that's just Pinot Noir in Italian is Pinot Nero. Wait, hold on. Pinot d'Anis is completely different.
That's different.
That's actually not related.
Okay. Pinot Gris, or Pinot Grigio in Italian, is sort of a grayish purple color. So it goes from your classic purple grape and it becomes kind of gray. And
Pinot Meunier, it's red, but it's a lighter red.
Like a translucent red. And then the other one is Pinot Blanc.
Oh, Pinot Blanc, of course.
So Pinot Blanc is pale green to a yellow green. So when Pinot Noir started changing colors, they're like, whoa, these are no longer clones. Let's start formally recognizing different types of grapes. Otherwise, all the other mutations just sort of get classified within the tolerance of Pinot Noir. It's sort of like a shapeshifter, but it's very subtle because genetically it's still considered the same grape.
That's what's so intriguing about Pinot. You just can't nail it down.
No, it's a fun one. Okay, that's it. So that's our episode.
Okay.
We'll wrap it up here. All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.